Happy 2022! Welcome to my channel, Comic Book Noise, where we talk about my comic book company, Digital Noise, where we explain the characters and the storylines of the Digital Noise universe. Today is an appropriate day to talk about within the new year. Is on the subject of where the comic book industry is headed in 2022. This is a subject that I've been pondering about and very excited about, and we all should be excited about it. And we should have Marvel and DC, the big two giants of the comic book industry, to thank for it. I want to give homage to Marvel and DC because they were the inspiration of me wanting to be a comic book artist and as well as a comic book creator. And now I have my own comic book company called Digital Noise. So I want to give homage to them because, right in when I was, I think 9 or 10, I was in a drugstore and with my dad, and it was like a corner shop for my dad's work, and I was with my dad, and he was, taking me to work and stuff like that with him because he had to watch over me because my mom was working, and I was bored, and because he was doing some shopping, and then I saw this rack of comics, and so my first two comics were Red Sonja and the X-Men. So this is how this was created and Digital Noise became to be. And so that led me into just working in the comic book industry. Myself, I work for Marvel, DC, and other pretty major comic book companies itself. And it inspired me to create my own comic book company, Digital Noise. So that's that. I just want to give a little homage to that on the side. But anyway, Marvel and DC have put the comic book industry and the comic book genre on the map for a household name. And I mean, there's no denying that. I mean, when, before we all know and love, and it was their pop icons like Superman, Batman, Captain America. They were around, and they were America's sweetheart, basically. But if you look at it today, Marvel and DC are now worldwide names, and their characters are worldwidely known all over the world. Even if you're living under a rock, you know who Superman and Batman and the Hulk is and stuff. So at this point, you know who that is. Just look at the Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, even in the comic book industry, when it was just a comic, nobody really knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were. And look at it now, since the MCU universe came to fruition. I mean, now everyone basically knows what the Guardians of the Galaxy is. But that leads into now just telling that Marvel and DC has spearheaded the comic book industry into a household name or into a household commodity. I mean, the genre of the comic book industry are the main breadwinners of the Hollywood circuit. I mean, basically, if you want to have a blockbuster film, almost a sure bet or guarantee that it will be a comic book film from Marvel or DC. Basically, you will have somewhat of a blockbuster or whatever. I mean, look at, recently now with the Spider-Man film, it just grossed over $1 billion like within a week or so worldwide. So it's just an amazing thing to see. And it's just going forward. I just see so many promising things in 2022. Now, let's look at what's going to happen, from my opinion, in 2022 for the comic book industry. The comic book industry, I feel, let's take Marvel and DC, for instance. So right now I'm going to talk about Marvel and the MCU universe. We already know in past recent history the success that the MCU has brought to the table. I mean, you have starting with the Avengers and then the characters from Iron Man, Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye and the Falcon series, Scarlet Witch and the Vision, just so many vast things. I mean, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain Marvel, and then Black Panther making history and then was up for an Oscar itself. So it's just the MCU universe is just an incredible entity that just made zenith amounts of success for the Marvel universe itself. I mean, and DC itself is pretty amazing too. I think DC needs to get more in tune with Zack Snyder to help them make it to where they want to go. I think Zack Snyder is like the best director of superhero films. I mean, Man of Steel to me today is like one of the best superhero films ever created. I mean, it's just outstanding filmmaking in itself. I mean, besides myself, if I were to direct, I would have Zack Snyder direct my films if my comic book titles become a film. And so it's just an amazing thing and that I see with the Marvel and DC universe and where I'm seeing where Marvel is headed. Marvel is headed to another realm of now with making the main characters and the heavy hitters of Marvel household name. Now they're going into other B characters of Marvel like She-Hulk, Moon Knight, and Miss Marvel. These are new films or new series that are coming out for the MCU universe. And then now you're going to enter, I think it's called the fourth phase now in 2022 of Marvel MCU universe. I think they're going to start dabbling now, making the MCU universe version of the X-Men. That's going to blow everyone's mind. And I think the X-Men is going to go beyond expectation. What I want to see for the new cast of the X-Men is to have the X-Men follow the model of the comic book more than just be more of a Hollywood type of thing. Just really follow what Marvel had done to put the X-Men on the map. Because the X-Men itself was successful in its own right, and it's kind of is a milestone in comic book history what the X-Men did for the comic book industry. It actually introduced diversity, which is a thing now in the Hollywood MCU universe, is to show diversity. The X-Men already represented that in the 70s. And that's what put X-Men on the map in the comic book industry. And what I would like to see them do more is be true to the characters that were created originally. I think the standard X-Men, I think is during the John Byrne and Chris Claremont era or Dave Crockham era. For one, to make Wolverine actually the physical type that Wolverine should be. I mean, Hugh Jackman did a beautiful rendition of Wolverine. I mean, for that universe, before the MCU took over the X-Men, when they did the X-Men films before. But I think in the MCU universe, Wolverine should be the height of, 4'11", 5'2", something like that. I mean, he's not tall at all, but he's built, bulky, and I think that's what is part of what made Wolverine the successful character and the Superman of Marvel in the comic book genre itself. So I wish they would cast an actor around that size to portray him, and I think it would be perfect. And just the rest of the characters, just have someone that can act and looked as those X-Men in the John Byrne, Dave Crockham, Chris Claremont era. And I mean, that so many people would be so happy if it would catapult the X-Men success in the MCU universe. I think more than any of the other comic book title, books that they adapted to film. And so I think that would, it would just go beyond expectation. And so it's going to be a new ride in a new dimension and a new way of storytelling in the film and a new direction of film outside. It doesn't have to be the formula of the Avengers. They can have their own style. Actually, to tell you the truth, I would love to see Zack Snyder do the trilogy of the X-Men and direct that film. Direct those films of the X-Men. Just have him spearhead those films if DC doesn't find the value in Zack Snyder of doing their films of Superman or Justice League. I think MCU should just swipe Zack Snyder up and just have him tell the MCU universe X-Men. And I think he has the darkness of the X-Men. He has the style that the X-Men need that is totally different from anything else in the MCU universe of director style. And I think that would set the X-Men apart from the Avengers, because I don't want to see another style of Avengers being told in the X-Men trilogy, because the X-Men is a little bit more dark. And I think the X-Men feels a little more real than the Avengers as far as story goes of the titles. And DCU universe just needs to stay consistent, and they need someone to spearhead them. I don't think that DC should have executives tell what direction the DCU universe should go. I think they should have someone like a Zack Snyder just spearhead and kind of manage where the DCU universe should go creatively. I think the executives should stay out of creative needs, and because if they want to be a success, they need to be coherent. You don't need one hit there and then like 5 losses here and stuff like that. Just have someone meld the story together to make the DCU universe coherent, and just to have a good director and a good producer to produce these films, and just let it go, and then let it ride and let everyone enjoy it, and it will be a success where Marvel or the MCU universe is. So now where I want to talk about now is where the comic book genre is going in 2022 for the independents. Independent comics are growing substantially for the consumer. And I'm sorry, that's my dog. She's going to drink water right now. But it's growing substantially, and I think it's because of Marvel and DC spearheading the comic book industry as a household name. And that's great for the independent comic, especially graphic novels nowadays. So that's especially exciting for me because I am a independent comic creator myself. So as you know, my comic books are of 4 comic book titles. But if you haven't heard or if you haven't seen my comic book or this content long enough, my comic book titles are Delete, The Positive Omen, the Red Alert, and the Sound System. So it's very exciting. And these 4 titles. I'm coming out with graphic novels starting in 2022. And it's very exciting for me because outside of Marvel, so now other entertainment entities outside of maybe Disney itself and also Warner Brothers, other comic book companies are low-hanging fruit for the other entertainment giants that would like a part or a slice of the pie of comic books itself. So there's all these titles going around and from independent comic book creators that are now being upheld by the consumer because the consumer wants something outside of Marvel and DC to see a different perspective, to see a different side, to see different characters, see some original storytellings, to see somebody that represents them that Marvel and DC hasn't covered. And just another idea, something iconic and something new outside of Marvel and DC that's a little bit commercial. And I think there's so many beautiful independent comics out there that will lend to this. And I think this is where 2022 is going to be exciting for the independent comic creator. I think that's exciting for all of us who love comics and that create comics. So I just think 2022 is going to be an amazing thing for us independent creators. So, well, that's all I have to say. Happy New Year to you all out there, and stay safe and take care.